All right, we are back today with David, the millionaire, the military millionaire, Pere, aka Frenchie. He is known obviously as the military millionaire because he's a heavy investor in the real estate. So, give me a broad 15-second overview of who you are and what you're doing.
Marine Corps veteran, bought a bunch of houses, and now I like to travel and shoot guns.
We'll be friends immediately. You're gonna fit right in with us.
Already the top episode.
And I like fast cars, but I don't own one yet.
How about motorcycles?
Yeah, so I sold all my toys when I got into real estate, but I do have a Ducati now, and then Tesla Model X, which I guess is fast, but it's not the same. So I'm buying a Porsche later this year. Finally, think I'm at a point where I can justify it. We'll see. I keep talking.
Are we talking muscle car like speed, or are we talking like sports car speed?
Yeah, no, I want like a track car, like a Porsche 911 GT3 RS or a Turbo S.
My cousin, he was also in the military. One of my Indian feather knot dot cousins, and he's like 6'6". And when he was in the Naval Academy, he bought a Porsche. And I'm like, how is your big ass fitting in this little Porsche? Like, he looked like a gorilla driving the thing. And I'm not gonna say you look like a small man, Dave, but you don't look like a small man. So I don't know how you're gonna do it in a Porsche 911, buddy.
It don't matter. I'm okay being a little uncomfortable if I get to go fast.
All right.
Yeah.
So David, kind of, if you could just basically start what from high school, kind of like, did you go straight into the military? Did you go in the workforce? Kind of what that looked like, and then how you eventually got into real estate and why?
Yeah, no, I went from Domino's delivery boy and antique auto restoration and coffee barista, whatever the hell, to the military right out of high school. Mainly because I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I didn't have money for school. I didn't like school. I didn't know what I would want to study if I went to school. And at one point I actually thought about firefighter or law enforcement. And then I was like, wait, I want to leave Arkansas. I can't do that in either of those jobs. So what's the best blue collar job that'll pay me to travel? Marine Corps. That's great. And then I did that. The plan was 4 years, and then I'd have money for school. They'd pay for everything. And then I just kind of fell in love with it. So I did 13 on active duty. I was a motor T guy, so drove big trucks. I was I was homeschooled, super conservative family. And yeah, I just didn't have money for school and didn't really know what to do with my life. So I was like, military will give me some adventures along the way. We'll figure it out.
Why Marine Corps instead of one of the other ones?
I met with every branch, and I think that everyone, as much as everybody talks smack about everyone else in the military, I think it really just boils down to personality types. There's a personality that fits the Marine Corps, and there's a personality that doesn't, and that's the same for every other branch. And when I met the Marine recruiters, they're obviously the sharpest dressed, and they've got some crazy stories. But for me, it was more like, the Air Force is much more like professional and clean and like politically correct and like kind of whatever. And I'm like, fuck that. That's not me. I don't want to be that guy. And the Marine Corps is like, you want to shoot guns and chase tail? I'm like, perfect. So, yeah.
So I'll be your Huckleberry. That's funny because a buddy of mine is in the Air Force, and he said that they started using the pronouns in their signatures, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, you take whatever direction you want with that one." That's not something that I would.
As long as I can use my LinkedIn pronouns, we're good, because LinkedIn lets you type it in, and so for like 4 years, my LinkedIn pronoun has been BDE, Big Dick Energy. And somehow it's still there, so I'm like, all right, cool.
They probably don't realize what it actually means.
Nope. They can't call me out on it anyway. It's who I am. It's where I identify. Don't make me sue you.
All right. So you got into the Marines. Your MOS was you working on big trucks. At what point were you like, okay, I've had enough fun for 13 years. I'm guessing if you were in 13 years, I'm guessing you were deployed a couple times. I'm guessing you re-upped when you were overseas because you get the bigger chunk of change. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't. My MOS didn't really come with a bonus, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I only had one combat deployment, and I went to a couple other places here and there. I was stationed in Japan, Hawaii, California twice, Missouri. I saw 13, 14 countries in the first 4 years. I mean, it was the adventure I thought it was going to be. I was a truck driver, but I went to infantry machine gun leader school, pre-scout sniper. I tried out for special forces, blew out my knee, DOR, which basically like tapped out. And then I got stuck on recruiting duty, and because why not? Like, of course, the guy trying out for special forces should have a desk job. That makes the most sense. But I did really well on recruiting duty, and it was actually on recruiting that I got introduced to the book Rich Dad Poor Dad and bought my first house. And then I was just like, I'm going to keep buying houses. This works. And so that would have been around year 7.5 in the military. And by the time I hit the decision to re-enlist or not at 13, I was like, I don't actually have to do this anymore. I'm able to live on what I've got going on. And that's, everyone thinks like, oh, Dave made enough money to quit, so he tapped out. Like, I don't need to deal with the BS anymore. But realistically, had it still been fulfilling, I would still be there. The problem is that as you get promoted, you do less fun stuff. It's like I went from driving the trucks and shooting the machine guns to sitting in an office. And at my last unit, I was in a skiff, which is like a windowless vault, cell phone outside, So I'm like 8 hours a day. I'm like, I don't have Gmail. I don't have my cell phone. And I'm getting yelled at by dudes who just stuck around because they didn't have anything else to do with their life. So they just kept re-enlisting or, whatever. I'm just like somebody's boot here. And then it was like, the war slowed down. There's no more deployments. There's no more ranges. There's no more shooting. I had traveled more outside of the Marine Corps than in that last few years. And I was like, man, like I haven't left the country in a decade. And if I was like, if I get out now, I can leave the country whenever the hell I want. And so it was just kind of the culmination of like no more adventures and, getting more and more responsibility and stuck more and more in an office. I was like, I don't want to keep doing this.
So you said you were on recruiting duty whenever you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which we obviously, or I should say when you were introduced to it, we've talked about that book at length.
Yeah.
What did that, I guess, look like? And then I'm assuming at some point you used your VA loan. That's definitely something I think it'd be worth mentioning. Like the three of us are not veterans, but there's several of our friends that are. And one in particular that I'm thinking of, I've been trying hard for him to like, hey man, you've rented for like 12 years. You have a VA loan. You should be taking advantage of this. So like, what did that book look like to you? Like what did that first deal kind of unroll? And obviously it parlayed into something much more.
Yeah. I read that book and I read a couple others. And when I say read, I mean, listen to, because I don't like to sit and read very often, but driving around, listen to audiobooks. And I came across this website, Bigger Pockets, talked about real estate, and I read some of their books. And really, I just kind of became obsessed with the idea of, house hacking. It seemed like a no-brainer to me, which now I recommend to anyone and everyone. But essentially, the idea is you buy a duplex, triplex, fourplex, you live in one unit, rent the rest. And so I bought a duplex, and at the time I was paying $550 a month for rent. My mortgage was $585 on this thing, and they were both 2-1s. And I went from paying $550 to paying $585, but receiving $475 in rent. I was like, oh, so I'm paying $440 a month less to own this place than I was to rent. That's cool. And when I moved out, it started paying me probably $200 a month. And I was just kind of hooked. I mean, it wasn't a ton of money, but it was the first time I'd done something to generate, essentially revenue out of thin air. I actually have, I always hate saying this because I have to like give the explanation, but I've actually not used the VA loan. And it's funny because I wouldn't say like the foremost expert, but like I'm known as the VA loan guy, and I've helped vets buy probably $100 million worth of homes through the community just by introducing them to people that are experts. And I'm actually a lender too. So like I've never done any a loan, but I'm licensed because I was speaking about it enough that I was like, I should have some kind of criteria or certification to say I did the test. But when I bought that first house, my lender told me you could only use the VA loan once. Don't waste it on this $79,000 duplex, which is wrong. But I didn't know that. So I used an FHA, which is still a great loan. And then when I got to Hawaii, I was priced out. The market was too expensive. When I went to California, I was convinced that, it was 2019. I was convinced the world was going to end and the market was going to tank. So I didn't want to live there and own a house. Little did I know COVID was going to quadruple property values around the area. So I missed out on $200-300K in 2 years. And then I moved back to Missouri, and I found this really cool loophole in real estate where we call it being unbankable. So when you leave your W-2 and you don't have a salary anymore, banks won't lend you money if you are a real estate investor and write everything off on your taxes. So I'm sitting here at the bank and I'm like, what do you mean I can't buy this $200,000 house? I own 50 of them. And he's like, yeah, but that's different. This one you want to live in. So we can't use your income from. It's such a weird game. So I ended up I gifted my then wife 5% down to do a conventional loan to move into this place and refinance it into an investment loan. And so I'm like, I've got this thing. I just got to figure out where I want to use it one day. I'm going to move to Austin and buy a mansion or something. But yeah. So, and it's funny because I didn't have the 3.5%. I was so broke. I didn't have the 3.5% down on an $80,000 duplex when I bought that first property. But I, luckily enough, had some drunk driver park on top of my Harley at a bar while I was inside eating a cheeseburger. And, he owned a car dealership. So he's like, I don't want this on my insurance. What's the bike worth? Stroked me a check, handed it to me. And then I sold the rest to Harley. And that's what I used for the down payment and the renovations.
One thing I think that we should really highlight, and it's an interesting concept. If you're not in the game, you don't understand this, is that buying real estate is a pay-to-play program if you're trying to buy something with something down. So you have to show income, pay taxes on that income to get approved to buy more house. So the more income you show, the more taxes you pay to play, and then you can get approved for more. So I'm the same thing. I have a bunch of stuff in commercial loans because it doesn't affect my debt to income ratio, my DTI. But then I have to have other things that show income because then I want to get approved for more. And it's like, oh my God, you guys can't look at the big picture because their view is so narrow. But I mean, it's just how it is. It's like pay to play program. There's other, maybe DSCR loans and stuff around it, but Mike's the same way. Mike's got stuff in commercial loans. Tyler's, he's got a bunch of properties, and it's kind of like, if you don't know this going into it, it's like, okay, I'd like to use my VA loan for 100% down, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, you can, but you need to have money for closing costs and have money for blah, blah, blah. So I'm glad you said that because it's something that's not really talked about.
Yeah, it's funny how different primary residences are. So I'm staring at my lender and I'm like, you have financed a hotel, 2 apartments, an RV park, and at the time 20 something houses that I currently owned. I think I'm down to 8 of those right now. And they're like, yeah, but you show a loss on your taxes. So, and I'm like, I paid $180,000 in mortgages last year. We're doing all right. And they're like, well, but it's just a whole stupid mess, which is funny. So now that I'm getting divorced, or am divorced or whatever, I think it's done. I don't know. Within the next week, it should be finalized. And, so I'm having to pay myself a salary out of my investments just so I can be like, oh yeah, I can buy a house because I'm making a salary. So I'm talking to my CPA, and I'm having to instead of using everything on the business card, I pay myself a salary and then use it on the personal card. And I'm like, it's such a stupid game. It's still my money. It's still going into my things, but whichever account it comes out of makes a difference.
Yep. So Tyler does lending too, and he just put in the notes, he's like, they think it's harder to approve, and the agents say the same thing. Tyler, you want to expand upon that? Why these people are so ignorant to how these things are funded?
Well, I just think it comes down to the listing agents are probably told at their weekly broker meetings that VA loans are harder to approve. The VA appraisers are going to ask for stuff that, FHA or conventional won't. So they just steer steering is a bad word to use because that's a big no-no. But they have their clients choose other loan products. So when you're submitting your offer, and if you see a VA loan, a lot of them will kind of shy away from it. And honestly, I've done a lot of VA loans as a lender. I have sold houses that I've flipped to people who have VA loans. It's really, I look at it this way. A, they served, so at no point should they ever be something that is a detriment to them. It's a loan product that they've earned. They should be allowed to use it. And then 2, it's really not that much harder than anything else. And you have a lot of qualified people. So I love using VA loans, both as a lender and when I'm selling properties. It's like anything. They're told at these meetings, this is something that they have heard. They're going to regurgitate it, not do any due diligence, and then it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. And to be clear, obviously, that's not every single agent, but we talk about this a lot on the lending side, that it's such a trip that VA loans get a bad name for this reason. And I think the number one reason I hear is they're worried about the VA appraiser asking for them to fix things. Like sometimes it's chipping paint or pest evidence of pest, wood destroying pests like termites and stuff like that. And it's not true. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say all that because I think steering is actually the perfect word, because what I've noticed is it's basically if an agent or a lender doesn't know how to use the VA loan, they'll just talk you into a product they do rather than pointing you to someone who does. The VA is actually better. I would argue to the death that it is the best primary residence mortgage on the market if you know how to use it. The inspection process for the FHA is worse than the VA loan. I've had people buy almost $200 million, I think, at this point, worth of VA loans over the last 5 years through my community. Not one of them that I've known of has fallen out of contract due to an inspection issue. And the appraisal process for the VA with Tidewater and everything else is better than anything else. So the long short on that is if the appraiser thinks he's going to come in lower than the price you're under contract on, he'll give you 48 hours to provide different comps to change his mind, and then they won't do that with any other loan. And then even then, if it appraises lower, you can go straight to the VA and say, hey, we think this guy's a knucklehead, redo the appraisal, here's our comps. And so instead of in every other loan, if Tyler's the appraiser and he says this is the appraisal, I then have to go to Tyler and be like, hey man, not to poke at your ego, but I think you're wrong. And then I hope that he's willing to say, you're right, I'm an idiot, let me change my comps, which never happens. Whereas in the VA scenario, it's like, hey, VA, this Tyler guy is a knucklehead. Obviously, Tyler's not an appraisal, so don't get offended. No, I'm just kidding. But like the appraiser doesn't even know that you went over his head. And the VA I have a lender in my community who said he's been doing loans for 15 years. He has had a 64% overturn on appraisal rate with VA loans, and he's had 2 non-VA loans in the entire 15 years that got turned. So it's like not even close.
The other way is like the DC way, where years ago you just pay the appraiser to tell him what you wanted to appraise for, and then it makes it through the process. So like I say that tongue in cheek because I know a lot of old school guys in DC, and like things would get tied up or held up because of whatever. And it's just kind of like, hey, the in-person conversation, not through email or on the phone, is, hey, what do I need to do to make this thing go through? Well, I need my car washed, I need new rims, I need some, money for whatever. And all right, done. And that's how, like, one of my buddies, his dad used to own a warehouse in the hood, and he couldn't get approved for something or other. So he went down there and just said, hey, what's it going to take to make this happen? And same thing for a buddy of mine who has a brewery up in Baltimore. This guy tried to shake him down. It was I'm not going to say who it was. Somebody came there and tried to shake him down. And he's like, look, dude, he's like, I'm a firefighter back in DC. Like, I know how this goes. Like, what's it going to take for you to go away? And he was like, oh, well, I need this. He's like, under the table, this will make it happen. It's like, man, like, there's still shady dealings going on.
We literally just described the mob.
Yeah. I mean, there's shady dealings always going on in certain places. Usually, I'm not going to call out democratic cities, but usually there's something has to do along the lines. It's not going to be a conservative state that this happens in. Like the 70 people just got popped in New York City for taking bribes, but that's a whole nother podcast. So yeah, I mean, it's back to the pay to play program. Like, all this takes into account, like, how can I make this deal go through? So you said, let's go back because I want my tangent right there. Let's go all the way back. So you said when you tried to get approved for this house, like, you had 20 houses and you had a car wash and something else. Like, how did you transition from military into acquisitions? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I actually bought a good amount of it while I was still in the military. Would just save up and buy something, or I got really good at creative financing. So like, I bought a 10 unit where I brought 5% down and the seller brought the other 10, and then my bank covered 85. And so I'd get good at piecing things together to try to make it work. But by the time I left military, I had 106 doors that I controlled between a bunch of random assets. But essentially, it was just slowly buying things whenever they made sense and holding on to them.
Where was this? Like, where were your holdings at?
Everything at the time was Springfield, Missouri, and really, yeah, or within an hour. And really, everything still is outside of like some larger kind of syndication investments that I'm involved in. Like, we just bought a hotel outside the Smokies. a couple apartment complexes. I probably got another 900 to 1,000 doors there, but my ownership percentage on that is, much smaller. So I don't
Are you
really
like
talk about it because I don't have a controlling interest.
Are you like an LP in a syndication? Is that kind of how it looks?
No, I mean I'm GP on all of them.
Okay.
So like the hotel's 130 keys. We bought it for 7.7. It's going to be, we're done with it. It should be worth around 14, and I own like 9% of it. But that's that's probably the biggest percentage. The other two, I think I'm like a 1/3% owner, which is nothing. But I mean, 1/3% of a $67 million portfolio is still decent.
Still probably more than I made when I started the fire department.
Yeah, you and I both. Yeah, it's cool. So those are all kind of longer plays. I either, I do investor relations, or I help raise capital, or I like on the hotel, I'm doing a lot of the marketing stuff and the third party booking and social media platform, Google business page and all that.
So you're not shooting guns anymore. You're in front of a computer again. Let's try and get away from the military.
The perk is that I can leave the computer whenever I want and disappear. So, it's a come and go. Yeah.
So
All right,
how
so-
did you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did you kind of make that transition from, hey, I'm buying these residential houses pretty much in your backyard, to bridging out to buying much bigger assets, by the sounds of it, in like geographically diverse areas? Like how did that look? Because that's a pretty big, at least from my perspective, like that's a pretty big mindset shift. Because like you're in your backyard, your own little sand lot, you probably know every street and good area and bad area where you came from, and now you're kind of like going, instead of a $79,000 duplex, you're buying a $7.9 million hotel. And just curious what that looked like, how you kind of made that. That's a pretty big leap in my mind.
Yeah. Honestly, it wasn't like an intentional thing. I'm kind of a fly by the seat of your pants guy. So throughout this whole time, I'd been, well, I didn't know at the time that I was building a community, but I guess I was building a community. I was just kind of blogging and writing about what I was learning online under this platform from Military to Millionaire. And, which was started really just because I wanted to learn how to write, because I was like, someday I'm going to write a book about when I was in Afghanistan. And it kind of just took off. Like people would ask questions and I'd go, oh, I got the same question 2-3 times. Let me write an article about it. And it grew very quickly. And so people essentially started coming up to me and they're like, hey, we see you've got this massive community. Do you know if anyone in your community would want to invest? Like, we'll give you, we'll let you in on the deal. If you bring investors, we'll let you run investor relations, due diligence, whatever. And so it was, I guess, kind of like a pay to play, right? Just helping to raise capital for other deals. And that, I mean, I did not raise a ton for the first deal or two that I tried that on, because I didn't know what I was doing. There's all kinds of SEC rules and things that I had no idea about. Then this more recent one, the hotel, was much more involved. Like, it was in my community. Someone found the deal. I introduced that person to the guy who I knew could take it down as an operator. And then I was much more involved in raising capital, but the like marketing side, social media side, business profile side for Google, because I owned a hotel already. So I'm like, I'm not totally useless here. This is an asset class most people don't understand, and they're I don't want to say they suck, but they're a pain in the ass. If you run like a mom and pop, like we had 7 employees when we started. We still have 7 employees, and they've been 2 separate crews. We're on the 3rd crew essentially. So we've got 7 employees, but they're not the same as last year or the year before.
A little bit of churn. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a whole different beast trying to play that game. And you get you get crappy 1-star reviews from people that are pissed off that you wouldn't rent to them without a driver's license. And you're like, that's not even like, that's like state law. Like, go away.
Yeah. That doesn't matter. That's the one thing that drives me nuts. Like, Google is this great tool, but it's kind of like, in my opinion, the Airbnb platform. It gives the faceless name behind the keyboard way more power than you do as a business.
Yeah.
And if you have poor service, like, I think you like, the whole intent behind a review is good. Like, but like, I had somebody leave me a 1-star review from my one storage facility, and she's like, I considered renting here, but they raised their prices. You didn't even become a customer and you leave me a 1-star review. Like, I just feel like that gives a person that in my opinion, doesn't get a vote, too much power against the business. But that's
Well,
a whole other discussion.
And there's
These
ways to pull
platforms.
those reviews, but Google doesn't always play by it. So it's
Exactly.
sometimes the
I wanna
best thing to do is to go directly to the consumer and raise hell. We had, I probably won't dig too deep into that because it's a government organization, but we had somebody leave like 3 1-star reviews from employees because they were pissed off about something. And it was a like domestic abuse shelter within the state. And like, they were like, you didn't let this lady stay. So like all of them started leaving reviews. And I'm like, we did let the lady stay. First off, we're not a battered women's shelter. Second, you still have to pay. Like, we can't just give you the room because you said XYZ, because we don't know what's true and what's not. And so they were like Google wouldn't remove them. And I guess luckily for us, one of my main manager has worked or had some personal stressors at one point in life and intimately knew like the state level domestic, whatever coordinator, and basically got someone to call down and say, hey, all of you are going to be fired if you don't fix this. And it was like, without that, we'd have 4 1-star reviews over a girl who didn't stay at the hotel because we offered her 50% off, and that wasn't good enough. Like,
It all goes
I'm
back
not
to
even
the DC way,
surprised.
man. DC way it's all about who you know or who you blow. So like that, apparently you guys knew the right person there.
was that the Grinder reference earlier?
No, that was the Monica Lewinsky reference.
Do you ever see that that one meme of Bill Clinton? It's like, just imagine there's kids today that don't realize that there's 2 people in this photo, and it shows him at the Oval Office desk. It's so classic, man.
That's a good one. I like it.
I want to ask all 3 of you something like, so obviously we've all done deals before, and this is a conversation that's never been brought up, is have you ever bought a deal that either intimidated you or like you look back and like, I shouldn't have done that, or like anything negative? Like what's something that you bought that was like, ooh, like this is a little more than I thought I was going to be? I'll start with you, David.
Yeah. Quite a few properties I probably shouldn't have bought. I bought a flip that I had no business trying to flip long distance. I bought a 64,000 square foot, 40 unit mixed use property on a lease option that ended up in a 4-year lawsuit that, I got all my money back and interest, but royal pain in my ass. Basically, I fell into like a lease option scam where the guy would take your money and then the building was nothing like advertised, and he would try to just, bully you out of the property without getting your money back. Little did he know how stubborn Marines are. And then, honestly, that first hotel, it's not that it was a bad investment, but we haven't cash flowed on it yet with CapEx and everything else because we overpaid. We took the numbers we were given, and they were absolutely not the correct numbers. Now, the rest of the portfolio is balanced it out because we bought from one guy off a direct mail letter I sent to a single family house. We bought 2 apartments, the hotel, and the house. So it was like 79 doors for 2.275 or something like that. And we've since sold the house and 2 of the apartment complexes. And so off of those, we've replaced all of our original money and double. So like we could take $100K hit each. So like we could sell the hotel for $300K less than we bought it for and still be break even. But we definitely overpaid. So we're just kind of continuing to keep that thing rolling along, do CapEx until we get to a place where, we've increased revenue by like 50%. And if we can hold that, then we'll get our money back out and some profit. But boy, that thing's been talk about an energy suck.
Was it financially worth it at the end of all of it, you think will be?
I think so. It was enough of a headache that there were 3 of us who bought that package. One of the 3 was actually one of my best friends, was willing to take. He was like pushing for us to take an offer on the hotel about 4 months ago, and I was like, bro, we're gonna lose money on that. He's like, yeah, I just want to be done. And I was like, then just give me your equity, and I'll take it and run with it, and you won't have to lose anything. And so I then offered half of that to the other partner. I was like, hey, do you want to, if you're in this for the long haul, let's go 50-50. Otherwise, I'm going to go 66-33 and I'm going to run the thing my way. And so he was in. So now we're 50-50. So the other guy, off the 2 apartments in the single family, he probably threw $100K at it and probably got 100 and 80 back, so still good as far as a bad deal. And we're sitting in the same position, but by the time this thing sells, I mean, even if it was just the principal that we recouped, we bought it for $850. Our note on it right now is $5. So I mean, even if we just sold it at $850, the two of us would make money on it. But
so is the headache worth the profits?
it was not the first year. Now it's not so bad. We just do like a 30-minute meeting once a month or once a week. That first year was driving to the hotel once a week and, having this 40 minutes away and having to do employee meetings. And we had a fucking lady drown in the pool and we got a lawsuit over that, even though, somehow it's our fault when the ladies, I can't say she was intoxicated because they won't release the toxicology report, but I can tell you, and you guys being in the job that you are, you can probably all imagine that if somebody drowns after a domestic abuse incident in your hotel and they won't release the toxicology report, like the family refuses, there's probably a reason. So I'm not super
I'm not a cop, but that would definitely, I'd call that a clue.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can, anybody, this happened to a buddy of mine too, at one of his Airbnbs, is somebody drowned in his pool and they sued him. And even if he's in an LLC, they can still sue you for negligence. So he went back and said, hey, look, I had everything required. I had the 4-foot fence around the pool. It has a lock on it and blah, 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 blah. He's like, it's not my fault that you weren't watching your kid. I feel bad that you lost your offspring, but at the same time, like, this is your responsibility, not mine. So like anybody can sue anybody for anything and cause you a headache. But at the same time, like, this is, even if you're in an LLC, if you're negligent, they can pierce the veil or pull back the veil or whatever you want to call it and then still go after you. So don't be negligent. And obviously you weren't, because as you mentioned, it sounds like that there were other unforeseen circumstances that you didn't know about until it came out later. But so Tyler and Mike, let me ask you the same question. Like, have you ever bought into an investment that intimidated you? That was it worth it in the back end?
I think they're all somewhat a little bit intimidating, like your first couple times you do anything. But no, I think the only thing I was just thinking when you asked that is, for me, the thing I regret or I wouldn't do is every time I actually buy a house with my own cash, I feel like it's like no private financing. I feel like I sit on that thing and just do nothing with it way longer than I ever would if I owed somebody money. And every time, like, I get these good deals and I've sat there for months and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? So, I mean, for me, the only thing I've learned is I need to take debt on property. It gives me a good motivation to get stuff done, and I seem to be a lot more efficient. So I think all the mistakes I've made, and I've made a ton of them, and I continue to make them all the time, it's just sharpening our sword at this point. It's like, it's not, I feel like nothing is fatal. As long as you can get back up the next day, you can recover. And there's a good book I'm reading. I'm going to put it in the show notes, called Zeckendorf. This dude had the biggest balls I've ever seen. And he would keep going. And I'm like, how is this guy not afraid to do deals like this? I mean, I'm talking the United Nations building in New York, stuff that big. And he just kept pushing and pushing. And I've like, from what I gathered from that, and like even listening to David, who's done a lot bigger scale than I ever have, it's like, I think people just know, hey, I can do this. And if it doesn't work out, there's a way to unwind it. And it's not going to be the last deal I'll ever do. So
what's that book called? Unfucked? Or what is that? Like, as long as you can unfuck
the book I'm reading?
No. Yeah. What's that book called? Fuck it. Why not?
I just pulled it up on Amazon while he was talking. I'm like, that sounds right.
Zeckendorf, dude, it's an old book, man, but this dude it's crazy. I mean, if you read it, it goes into like, it's amazing. And I'm like, dude, this guy had no fear. And he ended up going BK, I think, at least once, but he had like one of the largest real estate empires in the country. So, and I had never even heard of him. So,
what about you, Mike? You buy everything that intimidated you that was not worth it in the end?
Well, I would say my first deal, not that because it wasn't worth it in the end, but because it was intimidating. Like, it was a 2-unit, which now, I mean, obviously would probably not be that big of a deal, but like at the time, and that's why I always am very interested in the mindset component, like, because it's all just a couple more units, couple more zeros, whatever the case may be. But like that first 2-unit might as well have been the United Nations building to me, and because I was like, man, if I screw this up, everybody's going to say I told you so. And it was like, so at the time that was very, it was like, all right, we talk about it. Let's be about it now. Like that was kind of like that pivotal moment. In the end, it was obviously worth it. I always say it was my best deal because it was the one that got me started to get that flywheel rolling. And obviously, you do deals. Like, I love how people are like, I've never lost money on this. I've never lost money. Like, cool, man. I guess you're just the cat's ass. Like, I've definitely lost money on some deals, not a lot here or there. Like, you'll have stuff come up, and there's deals I bought. Like, we were talking about septics. Like, I bought a flip. I had a septic inspection, had the bid, everything ready to roll. And then there was a change in the local jurisdiction's health department, and the guy that approved stuff wouldn't approve that previously approved plan. So I got screwed and basically had to sell it with a holding tank instead of a septic system, and it tanked the value, and I lost money on that flip. But it's like, hey, lesson learned. All right. So it's one of those things. Like, was it a bad deal financially? Yes. Education wise, like Tyler just said, sharpen my sword, man. So now I know, listen, if Harry the dipshit over here at the health department wants to play games, I need to make sure not only do I have this, I have X, Y, and Z. I'm dealing with that right now with MDE. But because I've been down this road, I called the county, got a hold of this person, and filing a variance. But I wouldn't have known how to do that had I not got screwed before. So it's one of those, like, don't always, like he just said, like, failure's not fatal usually. Like, even if you lose a couple bucks or something doesn't go right on these deals, which I can tell you, nothing ever goes 100% right on them. Like, if you make $1, you got $1 million worth of education probably in the process. So yeah, we've all taken some lumps,
That's
So,
where you have to go back to where we started about earlier. Is go back down there and be like, "What's this going to cost me to get this thing passed this time, buddy?" Like,
Yeah.
Harry the dipshit says I can get it passed. Like, how much is it going to cost to get this passed?
yeah, it's just, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still frustrating. Like, there's still a lot of, you're just like, grit your teeth sometimes, but it's just the way it is, man. It's, everybody faces it, whether you're dealing with your 7 employees or the drowning or this or that. Like, there's always something, So,
Septic
David,
is
so
a quick way to kill
what's
it.
next for you? Like, obviously, you've done a shit ton of stuff. So, like, what's next? Like, is there anything that's interesting you that you want to try as new? Like, what's the next plan?
Yeah, still looking at the boutique hotel space. I'm becoming a bigger fan of that because I love, like, Airbnb short-term rentals, but they all have these ridiculous regulations imposed on them, and the hotel side doesn't. So you can have, like, the best of both worlds. So I really like that niche, and the idea that if I buy one, in various places that I like to go, I can travel and visit, my asset and stay for free. I'm under contract on a duplex right now, just a little crap duplex in a small town, but good deal. So still buying stuff here and there where it makes sense. And then I think the thing that interests me that I haven't really started digging into yet is development. I'd like to get into some development at some point and build something cool.
We had me and a buddy of mine. He came to me. This is probably about 2 years ago now. We talked about this on a podcast. Was this builder said that he wanted to do some development. He had claimed bankruptcy, so they needed somebody with real estate experience and somebody with money. So my buddy Scott came to me. He's like, we can partner together and be a partner on this guy for the deal. I was like, okay, well, I don't know him from Harry, so let's do some background investigation. And I looked at his portfolio, and his portfolio was, what it ended up being was all the stuff that his family had done, but not he had done. So one of the things that he had said in his portfolio that he had done was this club in DC. Well, the guy who managed the club in DC is a guy that I grew up with, and we used to do kickboxing together. So I called him, and I was like, hey, do you know who this guy is? He's like, I've never heard of him in my life, and that's never been done at this building. So I was like, okay, he's lying about this. And I was like, my head been like 2 years ago now. And it was one of the things that I never had to put money into it, but I put a lot of time into it. And it was a fantastic educational experience because I learned a lot of moving parts and what you should and shouldn't look for. And I'm by far not somebody who's well versed in it, but now, I've got my foot in the door and I've got an idea of who's baffling me with bullshit. And he's the kind of guy who was a bullshitter. So I like development. I'd like to do it as well. I just, I want to develop a campground at some point in my life.
Nice.
That's one of the things I want to do.
Yeah.
So So David, to that point, like you said, you got started with all the residential stuff with Rich Dad Poor Dad. As far as the development goes, like where do you think, are you going to educate yourself and then just jump in? Are you going to partner with the developer and just kind of shadow them and for a share of the profits? Do you have an idea how that looks, or just going to kind of, when the opportunity presents itself, jump on it and then go as far as you can see?
Yeah, my hope would be essentially to partner with someone and help. My value add would be, hey, I can help you raise capital for your deal. Let me tag along and learn everything and be involved. There's a couple decent sized developers out here, but it's been harder to get a hold of them. Like I kind of figured I'd be able to inch my way in with like my experience, but it's just, they're busy guys. So we'll see. I'd like to build a tower here in Springfield. Like there's, we're poised. It would make sense. Like, residential or like retail on the bottom floor too. And then condos all the way up and like a rooftop pool and bar with a, restaurant or whatever. That's like the big kind of vision thing, but I think that's probably 15 years down the road.
That sounds like everything being built in DC. Like we just agreed to sell one of the firehouses to a developer, and they're going to develop the firehouse on the first floor with shopping around it, and then condos all the way up with like a cricket court on top of it or something fucking random. It's fucking weird. But we just had a podcast that we did with Kirby Scholes, as his family develops the eastern shore of Maryland, just outside of Annapolis. And they just built a Hyatt to spec. So I didn't know this before, is that obviously Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, they're all different. So, and what they have in demands for the build. So they ended up going with the Hyatt, and they built it to spec to carry their name. They still own it, but they're like the franchisee of it. I thought that was interesting. I never knew that you could build a hotel to spec so you can get their name put on it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, you can renovate a hotel that way too. They call it planting a flag on the hotel. So, and yeah, you can go into like Comfort Inn and then, or whatever, like you can choose your class. It's a win-lose. Like you get access to all of their marketing and everything else. But it will cost you a fortune because they'll come in and say, yeah, we need you to do all this. So, like imagine you just painted the whole building and they're like, wrong color. Or, so there's a lot of like, but the numbers are there. Like if we put 300 or 400K into our hotel to plant a flag, we could probably sell it for 600 to 800K more on the back end. We've just kind of enjoy building it with our own brand in this case. This one's a small hotel, so we'd be, at like a Quality Inn or a Comfort Inn, or I think it was originally a Comfort. And then it lost its flag. That's the other piece. You can lose your flag if you don't update things they tell you to. They'll throw you to the wind. Or in our case, if you accept crack hits, like a hit or two for a free night stay, they'll get rid of your flag. That's apparently what happened to ours back in the day. So
we just had one in College Park. I live by University of Maryland, and there was one that there was a prostitution ring that was running out of there, and they got caught and they lost their flag. Hey man, DC Metro. What do you expect? We're between Baltimore and DC. It's just a little grimy in some areas.
No, it's all good. Yeah, people.
So, David, we alluded to it, I think, earlier, but you've kind of also started like an online community. I know you said you started it just as basically a place to write, and I think I've heard you talk about that on Brandon Turner's podcast. Just like he challenged you to write about it, and that's kind of where the Military to Millionaire like group, for lack of a better term, came from. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon is kind of the driving force behind that idea. Then I ran with it and had no idea what it was going to become. But
so, what is it now? Like, what does that kind of look like? Because we kind of started that with the first responders side of things, and still aren't really sure at times where it's going or what it's going to become. But just curious from your perspective, starting it without really an end goal in mind, what's it look like now?
Yeah, we've got. Primarily free content. I have a paid like mastermind group, that's only open to service members or vets, but everything else is open to anyone, although the vast majority is still service members, vets, and spouses. We've got 65,000 people in a Facebook community or a Facebook group, and then probably 100 on TikTok, 40 something on Instagram, 200 plus podcast episodes out. So just kind of been slowly cruising away. But the Facebook community is the meat and potatoes. It's a pretty cool hub.
Did you grow that organically, or did you do promotions? How does that look?
I have probably spent $1,000 on ads in total over the last 6 years. So, yeah.
How did you
Most
grow
organic.
that so much? Obviously, the content, I mean, I'm not a member of it, but I would imagine it's probably pretty quality content. And at times I feel like we provide quality content, but we can't grow to get out of our own way sometimes.
You guys are more than welcome to join the community. I have no idea. It was growing like 100 people a week in early 2020. And then all of a sudden one day it was like 100 a day, 200 a day, 300 a day. And it jumped from 7,000 to like 48,000 in a year. And I was like, holy crap, what in the world is going on? I never really figured it out. Like, Facebook's weird. Like, the more engagement that you have, the more they'll push you to like-minded audiences. And the more, I would run some contests to try to get people to like invite their friends, but that was always like, that was before I took off. So I don't really have a.
Yeah, I think like once you hit that algorithm, like Gulfstream, that's whenever it takes off, because it's weird. I've seen that sometimes with like some social media posts, like, why is this one do so much better? And I think a lot of it's like engagement, especially early on. Like if you post it and engagement quickly happens, it kind of like gets drummed up. But yeah, I was just curious because that's a pretty substantial number.
Yeah.
It's funny how different algorithms work for different platforms, like TikTok. I posted, we have one guy who's practicing to do the funeral over at the Arlington National Cemetery. And he was doing, I think, Amazing Grace. And he had I got like 361,000 views on that on TikTok. And I just posted the same song with a different like backdrop at the same firehouse. And I'm at like 2,000 views. And it's interesting. Like once people play it for 3, 6, 9 seconds and they continue to watch it, then they'll push it on to the next person, the next person, the next person. Yep. But if somebody doesn't continue to watch it or they don't engage in it, that's why like, I don't know if Facebook, I have an automatic welcome to the group thing set up. So like, I know that every 24 hours or every week, something like that, we're getting 6 new members. So I have an automatic thing set up to say, welcome to the group and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if that's not enough engagement for people. It's just interesting to see the different algorithms, how they take off. So hats off to you for growing such a big group. I'm sure you get a lot of friend requests from a lot of people.
I've hit my 5,000 limit a few times and had to back off. But
how much time do you get to spend with that 65,000? Like, are you actively moderating that whole group, or have you moved to the point where it's like you have people moderating for you? And were you more active in the beginning versus now?
Yeah, in the beginning I spent probably, I don't even know, like 30 minutes to an hour a day probably on it. Probably more at some points throughout there, but now I'm like maybe that in a week, specifically on the group, because I have some automated posts. And then I'll go in and like, basically I have 8 moderators that are all VA lenders. And so they rotate Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday with a extra, kind of just checking in. So they each have a day and they'll go in there and clear stuff out. And then I will, my assistant will do some stuff in there, and she handles all the like accepting new members to the group and whatever. And then I got to a point where I'm like, I'll basically just go in when people don't know for sure what to do with stuff, and I'll kind of give feedback on it. But I spend most of my time in there either engaging with stuff or posting, articles or topics or whatever. I don't do very much moderation stuff anymore, thankfully.
So are you more heavily into, say, the podcast, or what takes your time up now?
Really, a lot of it's working on the mastermind community, trying to bring in good speakers and stuff like that. Podcast is a big piece. I've got 2 recordings tomorrow, and then a lot of it's really just trying to put out more content.
It's all time consuming. It's like we just did a podcast leading up to this one. We were talking about like, do we want to have a podcast or a mastermind? What do we want it to look like? Who do we want to have there? What kind of it just takes brain power. And it's at some point, it's kind of like, is this brain power and this energy and this bandwidth worth it for the return. And I think there's passion projects like you have and we have it's very fulfilling for our, mind, body, soul, whatever. But there's other things that's kind of like, okay, this takes way too much energy and time away from family or things I want to get done. So hats off to you for growing such a big community, man. That's
But it also brought you your $7 million hotel, right? So it's kind of like that whole lead input lag measure type thing. Like you've put in all this work, and who knows, you might have a fairly decent exit with your 9.5% in a couple years. And that not all, but from what you said, it kind of all organically grew out of your group, correct?
Yeah. So I would say the mastermind is, if you've got good ideas around it, it's probably not a bad idea, especially because you guys are all, firefighters or your whole audience is first responders. And I've often joked that I think that firefighting is probably like one of the best careers for getting into like real estate or whatever, because your hours suck sometimes, and then your hours are amazing. It depends on how you use it, right? But you work at 24 on, 48 off, 48 on, 72 off, whatever. Like in your off time, yeah, plenty of people who just play mom, play dad, hang out, do whatever. Nothing wrong with that. But then like I got a friend she's a IFBB or whatever, like bodybuilder pro. She's a EMS or whatever with a fire department, and she's like full-time bodybuilder, runs a not a yoga studio, but like a natural, like holistic healing, whatever. She's got like 2 or 3 side jobs, and I'm like, you could never do that as an active duty service member, and we don't necessarily get paid any better. So it's the perk of the way that y'all's schedule is set up. If you use it correctly, there's some firepower there for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Agreed.
I would have quit this job a long time ago if I didn't have the schedule I did or do. And it's been trying times because 2 separate times I've been moved from shift work to Monday through Friday day work.
Yeah.
And the first time it basically shut my business down, and that was the wake up call I needed, that I had no systems. And the second time it happened, my business actually grew.
There you go.
But I had 2 VAs. I had a business partner. I had systems and processes. Granted, some of them needed work. That was evident. But, it's like the tale of 2 different assignments. The first time it shut me down. The second time it helped me grow.
Yep.
So, but I say that if I always say, like, I don't know how people with normal jobs do it, like Monday through Friday, like I would have had to quit for sure. I would have wanted to quit for sure. So,
yeah, I get it.
David, if you were, we're going to wrap up on time here. I know we're getting long in the tooth. Is there anything that we missed that you kind of want to touch on or talk about?
I don't think so. We've kind of done a pretty good job of covering all the basics, I think.
How about advice? Like, what kind of advice would you give people who are starting out or looking to get invested, or military people who are looking to possibly get out? Like, what's some advice you give people?
Yeah, my favorite piece of advice right now is to really filter where you get your advice. So, the example I always give people is like, your mom has your best interest at heart, but if you want to be a pro UFC fighter, you ignore what your mom's saying, you pay a coach. Because whether she has your best interest at heart or not, she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. For some damn reason, when we get into real estate, people are like, oh, my mom said I shouldn't be a landlord. My grandpa knew somebody who had a terrible thing happen, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, but this dude over here who has a $100 million net worth and owns the Keller Williams regions for like 4 states is telling you that this is a good idea. Well, yeah, but my mom said, dude, okay, we'll go. Let's go back. Like, you're about to step in the ring with, Khabib. Do you listen to your mom or do you listen to like a striking coach? Like and so I always tell people, like, even if you have to pay to get in the room with people that know what they're doing and is a place that you can put things out into the world and listen to people who've been there, done that, as opposed to the naysayers, like, crabs will always do what crabs do in a bucket, right? They'll always pull you down. But if you get around people that they live the life you want, they've done what you want, they've achieved what you're looking to achieve, like, you can't fail. If you went to you've probably all seen the Pumping Iron, like the old school Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary about bodybuilding. If you worked out in that gym, you couldn't stay fat. You're surrounded by pro bodybuilders. You're gonna get big. It's like, but people are like, work out and they go to, like, I don't know, They fucking sit around and eat chocolate cookies and whatever, and they're like, I don't know why I'm not getting skinnier. Like, maybe have you tried going to a gym full of like healthy people? I don't know.
Now,
It's so weird.
okay, that's gonna lead me to the next one. So, how do you get past the noise? Because obviously, everybody out there is like, "I'm a guru. Pay for my course. Do this." You know, how do you get past the noise?
Yeah, I make fun of so many gurus online. It's great.
Yeah, there's so many dipshits out there that's just like shooting fish in a barrel if we really wanted to, man. It's like,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear your advice on this.
Well, I mean, it's a good question, right? Because you can't always tell. I mean, I always look for like guru math, right? So if they're, but if you're a new guy, you're not necessarily gonna know what that means. But like when I say guru math, I mean like they'll post a picture and it's like, look at this return, and it's like income, mortgage, cash flow, and you're like, well, what about the vacancy, the repairs, the capex? Yeah, exactly. So I look for the guys who are being flashy. Generally, like you can pretty quickly tell if they've got fake followers online, right? You go to Instagram, you're like, wow, this guy has 200,000 followers and 10 people liked his post, or they have 1,170 people liked all 4 of the last posts. And it didn't fluctuate at all. Like either one of those scenarios, you're paying for followers, you're paying for engagement, probably full of shit. The Lambo post and all of that to me just screams red flags. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just start asking around. You ask other people, either people that have been in the community, or you start. One of the accounts I like right now is Baller Busters. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Instagram, but they just call out gurus. It's
Following
great.
now.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But it's usually it's like everything else in life, right? Like the loudest guy is usually the problem. It's the squeaky wheel or whatever, but it's like the guy who's talking about how much money he has the loudest is probably the brokest dude in the room.
That's funny. I got like 4 friends who follow them now. I got a message last night. It's 2 nights ago when I was at the firehouse. I got this person. Their whole profile and personality is like millionaire by the time I was 19. I invest in stocks and millionaire and blah blah blah. And I go look at all the page, and she's got like, a lot of followers, but like 151 views, 148 views, 52 views. Like this is all paid for followers that these are red flags, and it's
absolutely.
These are things that you kind of take into account. And I just see a lot of guys. Like I just had one of my buddies. He came to me. He's like, "Hey man, I just bought this deal." He said it's great because of X, Y, and Z. And it was a 7-year lease on a project. I was like, well, how much are you coming out of pocket? He's like $40,000. I was like, will you make the $40,000 back in 7 years? He's like, well, I should be able to, but I can renegotiate the lease terms in 7 years. I was like, well, what do those terms look like? Is there any indication of that they're going to be the same or they increase? He's like, well, I don't know. I was like, it's a terrible deal. It's terrible. Don't do that. He's like, well, this guy I'm talking to, he owns a bunch of blah, blah, blah. He's like, he told me I should do it. I was like, no, man, like don't waste your time with people who don't know what they're fucking talking about.
I was gonna say, and is that guy on the selling end, right? I always look for that.
Yeah.
Is the reason they're giving you this? It's like financial. I hate the fucking phrase financial advisors now. I'm so jaded because of my Facebook group, but like it's like the infinite banking thing or whatever, right? Infinite banking, and it has a place, but it's majority written policies by people who don't even know what they're writing. And like the financial advisor, it's like, they all have, if you can find a fee only advisor who gets paid $100 every time you talk, no matter what, great, because everyone else is has commissionized, right? They all want, oh, well, this one will get me the most money. So of course I'm incentivized to push this policy to you. Like the whole idea behind infinite banking, if you structure it in the way that they sell it to everybody, it's the lowest commission you'll make on a whole life policy. So the guys are pitching this great thing and then writing the policy to do this other thing because that's where they get their commission. And so it's like, it's just not, anyway, don't get me started on that rabbit hole, but I like whole life, but not for everybody.
The fees overtake the profit margins, and the more greedy the person selling it is, the more fees they have. We get guys coming to the firehouse all the time trying to sell life insurance policies. We had one guy sign up. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, you don't have kids, you don't have a family, like you're not taking care of anybody. You lease a house or lease an apartment. Like, why do you need a $250,000 life insurance policy for what? He's like, well, just in case. I was like, who's getting the money? He's like, well, eventually I'll have a family. I was like, well, eventually you'll have to pay for it, but right now there's no point to. But that's a whole other conversation.
Oh yeah, you don't get me started on those guys.
All right, so let's start wrapping this thing up. I want to ask you a question,
comment, Tyler. I appreciate that.
if you can go back and give your younger self advice, now this could be, early military, pre-military, 5 years ago, a year ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Man, I mean, it would probably just be save more to invest more or pull the trigger faster. I thought about buying a house 2 years prior than I actually did, and I kind of got talked out of it by people who didn't know anything about rentals. And then I didn't know enough to, not be able to combat that. And so when I found Rich Dad Poor Dad, it was like, oh, this does work. But had I bought a house 2 years prior, I'd be in even better shape. Or if I had saved more in my TSP, or my investment stuff. I mean, I made all the typical like service member mistakes, right? I blew all my money on alcohol, Harley, tattoo, convertible, chicks, whatever. Great memories. But, it's like when I tell people, like, I get people that comment when I make these videos that I'm like, hey, don't buy this freaking sports car, buy a beater and save up and do this, this, and this. And down the road, you can, and they're like, yeah, but what about if I want to get all the chicks? I'm like, look, dude, if the chick wants you because of your car, that's not the chick you want anyway. And ultimately, if that's what you're cool with, like, don't buy it now. You'll have a much cooler car in 10 years. And trust me, as much as you don't want to hear this as a 20-year-old dude, as a newly single man in my early 30s, I will tell you, life is a lot easier in the dating pool when you're 30-something with money than it is when you're 20-something broke. So whatever.
20-something and broke means go to a college town, to a college bar, and then hang out there.
Yeah,
but
catch some diseases, have some regrets, maybe have a kid. No fun.
Okay, I mean that's okay. Wherever you want to go with that, that's cool. So,
just kidding.
My captain, when I moved to College Park, he lived in College Park too, and he was like, Aaron, I'm gonna give you some advice. And I said, all right, what's that? He goes, you can't fuck 5'2s and call them a 10. He's like, go for quality, not quantity. And I was like, to this day, I do the same thing for whether it be real estate or cars or whatever. And I'm like, that's solid advice, Cap.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
All right, Tyler, Mike, you guys got anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you, David. Awesome.
No, appreciate you guys having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on and just kind of shooting the breeze with us and just kind of telling us how it is. We greatly appreciate it. We appreciate your time. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, don't be afraid to reach out.
I've never had when someone says that, I've actually got something.
Let's see it. Let's go.
How do I get my ass through the volunteer firefighter thing? I tried at the local fire station. I applied to 3 of them in my area. And I didn't even get a call back. And I'm like, okay.
That's because they're probably dipshits.
I'm like, man, I've been through all the combat medic training. I've been deployed. You'd think I just want to have some excitement in my life. Put me in, coach.
I'm just trying to think. I don't know anybody.
I think you have high expectations at a volunteer firehouse, and I don't think you're going to meet your expectations. More like stub toes, hangnails.
Well, I mean, so it's kind of like I guess where I know Aaron and I live, there's kind of what they call combination systems. So you'll have some volunteer firehouses that are pretty squared away, and then you'll have some that are just absolute shit shows. You want nothing to do with them, obviously. My guess is depending on what their application process is, if you just called and talked to some random person that answered the phone, they probably lost the Post-it note, something like that. Most of these places now have a intake form on their website. If not, chances are they just probably are stuck in the 1940s. I don't know what their process looked like, but for us, we have a website you go to and you can basically go through the coordinator's office and they get you situated. But if you want offline, just shoot me your general vicinity and I'll see if we know anybody in the group in that area might be able to help you out.
Sweet. And I think Aaron just dropped me a link, so I'll check that out too. Yeah, I dropped off the full application at the firehouse and a couple different times. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, jeez. Most places are beat. They would do anything for volunteers, especially ones that are worth a damn. And but this is just one of the reasons I feel like that whole segment of the population is failing.
I wonder if you guys have a combination department or a full career department or what. Usually the smaller towns only have volunteers, or they only have 1 or 2 firefighters at the staff units. We can have a conversation offline if you want to about this. I'm looking up some of the stats over there, but everybody's going to be a little bit different, especially for requirements. You might have to go through Like I know if I went back to the county to volunteer again, I would have to go back and do like certain trainings to be qualified in this county. It doesn't matter if I have more experience than they do or not. It's just they want their qualifications in the forefront. And it's just, I don't know. Sometimes it's like they shoot themselves in the foot because they can't get qualified people because they're making them jump through hoops.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's like a government job. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So like, hurry up and wait.
Oh man, well I appreciate it, gents. I'll go take a look, and I appreciate the websites, Aaron.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to follow you, where should they locate you online?
Oh yeah, I purchased this domain and I love it. So if you go to thebestpodcastguest.com, you can download a free copy of my book and find all my social media.
there you go.
Yep, makes it easy to remember.
Awesome.
All right,
Well,
David.
thank you very much for your time, David, and look forward to talking to you next time.
Absolutely. You guys have a great day.
I can't wait to see you in a 911 Porsche.
Oh yeah, it'll be by the end of the year. That's the goal.
All right, buddy.